12 and 13, but continued to grow, and then 14 and 15, the 2 years without having the contract, we exceeded the state average by significant, and it's a pretty, having an average score of 24 from an average score of 21 4 years earlier, again, is a very, very good scenario that our staff continue to focus on doing the right thing for our students and the community by making sure that they're doing everything possible to deliver a better quality education, and obviously it shows. The test scores have, and secondarily, it's not that less people took the test, it's actually more people took the test. We've had, and each one of those ACTs, the SAT is generally an English component, writing, and a math component. The ACTs are broken down in English, mathematics, reading, and science. Every single category, English, mathematics, reading, and science, our students improve consistently each year for a 4-year period. The quality of the delivery system of education that is offered by our teachers and supported by the board and our community has grown each of those 4 years. Here was the old teacher contract, 2009 through 2014. Average increase was a 3% flat scenario all the way through, so it had a 15% cost increase over the 5-year period. There were no concessions with the exception midstream going to a PPO, so there were no cost savings in that. And again, that was a different time. Think about what happened between 2009 and 2014, and that was negotiated in 2008 prior to the crash of the financial markets. And from 2000 to 2007, the economy grew, property values grew dramatically, housing was off the scale growing, there were new buildings going on, so on and so on. And so there was a 3% contract with no concessions. The average cost per year was about $380,000 in additional wages, which accumulated to about $1.9 million over the 5-year period. The average cost due to the retirement incentive was actually very close to the same, $1.7 million over the 5-year period. And so the total cost increases that came due to that contract were $3.6 million. The current contract, the average salary increases are 2.75 as opposed to 3, or 16.5% over a 6-year period, and which drives a total cost increase of $2.3 million solely for wage, Social Security, and retirement contributions. The health care concessions and retirement concessions over the same 5-year period are $6.2 million. So you think, okay, wow, so the concessions are actually more than what the costs were. And that's the first time in the history of Western Wayne in many school districts and for many governments in any area that concessions are actually more than what the anticipated costs are. Those cost reductions are roughly $156,000 per year for $785,000 for health care, and $1.1 million a year for 5 years for the early retirement incentive compared to the 5-year average that we had in the past. And that bottom number assumes that all 17 people who are eligible are all going to retire. And we know that's not going to happen, but we're not trying to inflate any numbers. The reality is, and again, the teachers group recognized that the cost of the early retirement incentive in the past was squeezing financially the school district to a point that it was very, very unaffordable, and have agreed to something that is reasonable for them and affordable for the school district. Tough scenario to look at, but I'll summarize this. Our financial situation as a school district has gotten back to where we were 3 years ago. There was a tremendous draw on fund balance over the last 2 years to the tune of more than $1.8 million each year. We were spending more than we were taking in. Our costs were going up in years 1 and 2, and then the board and administration and staff did whatever they could do to reduce costs. Here are some of the things that happened in this last budget year. Number one, believe it or not, the tax collection rate, even after the tax increase, went up to over 100%. That hasn't happened in many, many years, which generally speaking means the economy got better and people could afford to pay their taxes. So that was $850,000 of unexpected revenue that came in on the current tax collection because more people paid their current real estate taxes than they had in the past. We budget 98.9 roughly, and it came in over 100. It came in at 100, and 100 is delinquent and current together. We had real estate transfer tax of an additional $80,000. That is 0.5% that comes in on the sale of real estate. So more real estate transacted last year than had in the previous year, and more than what we had expected. And it's another sign that one of two things that's a sign of. The economy is getting better, or people reduced their prices to more reasonable numbers, and there was more volume. Okay, and it's much more expensive to build than it is to buy. And until that crosses, we're probably not going to have additional assessed value added because of new construction, but we'll get more money from the 0.5% on a real estate transfer tax basis. Delinquent taxes went down, but it was more than offset by the $850,000. So it was $550,000 of additional tax money due to collection rate. Early intervention, there was a reconciliation that we got from 12, 13. No, that was a different. Oh, no, that's medical access. Yeah, our numbers increased on the early intervention, and we run the early intervention program for both Wallenpaupack and Wayne Highlands and us. So there are more kids in early intervention and more billable for that as well. We did, and everybody's been talking about it for a long period of time. You're more than welcome to come in. Come on in. Sorry to keep everybody out there. Come on in. The Evergreen School. We built the Evergreen School, and there's a plan-con process to build it. And the plan-con process is the state's share of what they're going to reimburse us for us to upgrade our facility. We went through that whole process, A through F, H-I-J, and each one of those takes a tremendous amount of time to put together. And the bottom line is we built the building with the plan-con approval that we were going to get our share of the reimbursement. The state reneged on their share of the reimbursement and has held back and held back and held back. And then we received that money unexpectedly just prior to the election. Surprise, surprise, how that worked. But we got $1.34 million of prior plan-con money that was due to us over the last 3.5 to 4 years. So that's a big number. So that was not budgeted. We had no idea it was going to be coming. So that's a big contributor to why our financial situation is dramatically better now. We got some school safety grant money. Ready to Learn, we were expecting to get continuation of the Ready to Learn grant, which we didn't. And the medical access was the reimbursement that comes through the medical access program for poor students who have services that the insurance will help pay for. And that was a reconciliation to a prior year that was unexpected and had never been anywhere near that kind of money in the past. It was much, much smaller. So generally, the general good news is we received $2.9 million more than in revenue last year, which was July 1, 2014 to June 30th, 2015. On the expenditure side, which we have a lot more control of, because some of those things on the revenue side, how do we know they were going to come? On the expense side, we're under budget because we weren't able to settle the teacher or the support contract, and the support contract, by the way, was 2 years in arrears, and our custodians and cafeteria workers were patient for 2 years and 4 months in order to settle that contract. Those numbers were budgeted, anticipating that they were going to be able to be, that we're going to be settled and paid. So that's $465,000 that we did not spend, that we will, because the contracts are going to be retroactive. But that was a reason. Our fuel oil, even as cold as the winter was last year, the price of fuel oil went from $4 a gallon 2 years ago to $2 a gallon. So the cost got cut in half, and we heat a lot of our buildings with fuel oil, so there was a big savings there. We reduced our staff, and people retired and we did not replace because enrollment was declining, and we did our best to not have to replace people who were retiring because of the financial constraints that the school district had. The combination of the salaries and benefits and staff reduction was $800,000. So that's a very, very big number. There were a whole bunch of, there were no raises for staff along the way, administrators or teacher assistants or secretaries, and that was another $100,000. Our extracurricular, the good news about extracurricular is we had, our band keeps winning competitions, and we send, as we talked about earlier, we have a district band. We don't know that we were going to be that successful. Some of our sports teams, track and wrestling and football, continued extended seasons because of being so successful and going down to playoffs. So net, our total expenses were down by $1.3 million. Our total revenues were over $2.29 million more than what we expected. So the bottom line on that is, and here's another example of how much expectations. Come on in, sorry. We actually spent less money last year by $2.4 million than we did the year before. And that total expenditure last year was less than what we expended in 2012-13. So between tightening and cutting and not replacing staff and enrollment going down to allow us to do some of those things, our expenditure per pupil actually has gone down. And again, if you go around, and I don't know of many school districts that expenditure per pupil has gone down. Here's the overall cost reductions for this contract relative to past contracts. The first column, $2.3 million, is the additional expenses due to salaries, retirement contributions, and Social Security. Cost savings on the healthcare part is $785,000, and the cost savings on the early retirement incentive are $5.5 million. And a big portion of that is no longer when a teacher retires, the school district is not in the business of providing health care going forward for that teacher or their families. So total overall cost reductions above and beyond the increases in this contract over a 4-year period are going to be just shy of $4 million. And again, I want to thank all the staff and the efforts of the board in recognizing that we can't do business as we used to be able to do business because the financial constraints of our community and the difficulties of people being able to pay their taxes. So, however, we still want to make sure that we can attract and retain great quality teachers, which obviously we have because our test scores are off the scale in a good way and continued even though we operated without a contract for a long period of time. So that's the good news. Here is the scenario of where we are overall financially, which again you can see our total revenues and total expenditures for the last number of years. This is 3 years. Our total revenues last year were $41 million and our total expenditures were $37 million. So our fund balance grew by $3.7 million. And I went through all those items before. That's a big number. Again, the biggest chunk of that was the PlanCon expense money. But you can see we started in 2012-13 school year with $4.58 million in fund balance. And we used 1.8 in that year, and the following year we used another almost 1.9. So our fund balance went from $4,558,000 down to $844,000. Woefully low, especially when the state doesn't adopt a budget, doesn't pay you. If you don't have a fund balance, you don't have a way to pay expenses to carry you for very long. The good news is our fund balance grew back to $4.5 million. Now, one of the things that immediately are going to come out when we settle our contracts are the back pay that's due to everybody. So that number, I believe, was about $600,000. So our fund balance, as soon as the contracts are settled, signed, and the back pay is delivered, will be about $3.9 million, which is slightly under 10% of what our operating budget is, which is in the expected range of a well-run and fiscally sound financial school district, between 5 and 10%. So we're just under 10. It's not excessive, but it's not at a situation where we won't be able to pay the bills if our revenue stream gets dried up by the state or the federal government. So the good news is we've righted the ship financially. We've had a lot of people, including the teachers and the staff members, who are responsible for helping us do that, and the board for doing whatever they had to do over the last few years to try to fiscally be as sound as possible, yet still providing a balance for the community from a taxation standpoint, and also for high achieving standards for our students. And the good news is we're on the track to be right back financially where we were, and educationally we're better. That's it. Questions, comments, concerns? Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you. We're going to take a little 5-minute break. We have a public meeting scheduled for